Okay, we have some people rolling in. I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to get in.
I would keep it going as long as you see numbers going up. I would wait till they stop.
Okay. Still have folks coming in. Okay, it seems like things are slowing down, so I will go ahead and get started. So everyone, welcome to CNHED's fiscal year 2022 budget recommendations webinar. Just some quick virtual housekeeping. This is a webinar, so we cannot see you, nor can we hear you, and you will not be able to unmute yourself for the duration of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and as we all continue to balance working from home in our remote existence, just excuse any children or dogs or any home noise that might pop up as people are presenting. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can contact myself, Hallie Holmes, or Raina Whitted, and our email addresses are right here on the screen. And the materials that you see during this webinar will be shared with participants and more broadly through our email listserv and on our website after the webinar. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to our board chair, Phil Heck, to kick us off.
Thank you, Hallie.
Phil, I think you are
No, you're muted.
All right, I'll try again. Thank you, Hallie, and welcome to our April monthly meeting. Today, we'll present our fiscal year 2022 budget asks to the council. This is the first time we've ever done it in a monthly meeting. That's because it's the first reason is because the mayor's budget release has been delayed until May 27th. So we have an additional few weeks to talk about it. And it's been delayed because of the influx of multiple streams of federal funds. The other reason we're talking about it today is because of the influx of federal funds. We have the opportunity to become aspirational in an unprecedented way and to ask, to share with us, why we think the aspirations are achievable and realizable with the council. I'd like to thank the CNHED working groups, the Housing and Economic Development Committees, the board and the staff for the hard work that they've done over the last several months, putting thought, data, and strategy behind our budget asks. We will need your robust advocacy, engagement, and your relationships in order to get these aspirational pursuits adopted by the council. So with that, I'll turn it over to our brain trust, Steve Guadet and his team. They will talk about the economic development, housing, and then advocacy in turn. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Phil, and excuse me, welcome everyone. I just want to say we continue to miss you, to miss seeing you in person, to convening in our historical normal means of meeting every month. We miss dining with you, and we miss the networking and exchange that happens informally. So I just wanted to kind of lift that up. The staff and I talk about it frequently. I think of all of the impacts of our continuing to work remotely. This one is one that remains kind of large in our minds and in our hearts. So we're going to hear first from Yvette, who's going to talk about our economic development ask and one new initiative in particular around digital inclusion. So Yvette, walk us through the economic development.
Hi, thank you, Steve, for the introduction and welcome everyone. So I will be sharing with you our budget ask for small business workforce development and digital equity. When we think about small businesses and the small business ecosystem, our budget ask is going to focus on the small business. Hallie, can you advance the slide? Thank you. So our small business assistance ask is focused on the services that are provided to small businesses through our small business technical assistance provider organizations, for which there are currently 10 funded this current fiscal year. And also our corridor support and managing organizations and programs that help to bolster and strengthen our small businesses. So CNHED is advocating $5 million for the Small Business Technical Assistance Program, which falls under the Department of Housing and Community Development. Again, that program currently funds 10 organizations that have been helping businesses with their PPP and filling out grant applications and other programs that have been really helpful for them during the pandemic. The Mentor Protege bonding program, that is a program that we're asking $150,000 for, and that is a program that is in partnership with the General Office of General Services, Contracting and General Services. And this particular program is really to help our small business enterprises to hopefully increase their bonding ability and also to engage in joint venture opportunities. The $10 million for the DC Capitalized Program. Now, traditionally, the Department of Small and Local Business Development provides access to capital to small businesses. In the past, there's that budget line has been really anemic. It's $169,000 has been allocated, and it's also gone as high as $1 million for access to capital. But because of the pandemic and the impact that we've seen on small businesses and the new programs that the district is introducing to bolster access to capital, not just for microloans, but they're broadening out their efforts to include loan loss reserve programs. And so we are asking for $10 million for the DC Capitalized Program. And this is a new program that is going to include or bundle various opportunities, funding and capital opportunities for small businesses, a loan loss reserve program, microloans, and then also maker loans for the creatives in the District of Columbia, and then the traditional access to capital line. And some of these funds would be made available to our community development, our CDFIs in the district, like WACF and LEDC, that also provides loans to our small businesses. Next slide. So now I'm going to focus on commercial corridors. There are a number of programs that are supporting our small businesses and our SBEs or MBEs in the district. So let me start off with Great Streets. Many are familiar with the Great Streets program. It is a grant program that supports small businesses on the corridors. This particular program supports infrastructure. And so we're asking for $3 million. In the past, or at least within the past couple of fiscal years, Great Streets was once funded as just a grant program, but the district also had bundled the Neighborhood Prosperity Fund and coupled that with the Great Streets program. This fiscal year, it looks like the district is moving to separate those two programs so we're advocating that the Great Streets program be funded for $3 million specifically for grants, and then that the Neighborhood Prosperity Fund, which is now under the DC Local Equity Access and Preservation Fund, we are asking for $3 million for that fund. That fund includes or bundles a couple of programs that will help improve or bring about development in specific areas of the district where there's lack of access to food, where there may be food deserts, or there's an opportunity to bring about new development in underserved or under-resourced neighborhoods. And so we are asking for $5 million for that particular program. We are also advocating for or asking the district to allocate $200,000 for the DCAP program, and that is the DC Community Anchor Program, which is a signature program within CNHED. This is reoccurring funding, and so we are again just asking council, and we will be advocating that council continue to support this important initiative that helps minority-owned businesses provide opportunities to pursue contracting or bid after contracting opportunities with our medical, our hospitals and educational institutions in the District of Columbia. And to learn more about that program, I would encourage you to reach out to Steve or to talk with Lindsay Poole, who's the person overseeing that particular program. And next is our Main Streets program. There are about roughly 24 main streets and that are being funded through the District of Columbia to provide assistance or support to small businesses along our corridors. And they are also providing clean and safety and management of our commercial corridors. We're asking an increase of 5.6 million for this particular program. This program is thinly staffed, and they have a heavy lift in managing this program. And we think because of the pandemic and the challenges that our commercial corridor businesses are having because of the pandemic, we are advocating for the 5.6 million. The Clean Teams is a complementary program to the Main Streets. We're asking 4.3 million for this program, and this helps to keep our commercial corridors clean and safe. And they work in tandem with the Main Street program. This is also an employment program for the District of Columbia. And then the Robust Retail and Dream Grants, that's 2 million we're asking for this particular program. And this fund is, this grant program provides valuable dollars to help small businesses on commercial corridors. But in particular, the Dream Grant also supports businesses specifically in Ward 7 and 8. Next slide. Now I'm going to shift to talk about workforce development. This is the first time that CNHED is including workforce development in our budget ask. While we have advocated for it and talked about our efforts around supporting workforce development in the District of Columbia, we have a specific ask for the Career Pathways Innovation Fund. This particular fund provides grants to build the capacity of those organizations that have a integrated education and training program where they include literacy and numeracy skills that are embedded and built into how they deliver their workforce training programs. And so we're asking for 2 million for that particular program. And then for the Healthcare Workforce Partnership, we're asking 250,000 for this program. The WIC, the Workforce Investment Council, recently announced the startup of a new intermediary that will help to provide opportunities, employment opportunities for our district residents in the healthcare industry. And that intermediary has just started up, and we are asking that the district continue to fund that initiative for 250,000. Next. CNHED is embarking on a campaign, which we'll talk a little bit further about in this budget briefing. Many of you hopefully have received a pledge or request to sign our pledge to support digital inclusion in the District of Columbia. And as part of that effort, we are also aligning our budget to help bolster our advocacy efforts and to raise the attention around the issues and the gap of digital equity and inclusion in the District of Columbia. And with that, we are asking the district to provide $800,000 in their budget to support SNAP recipients or individuals who are part of the SNAP program under the Education and Training Division of the Department of Human Services. We're asking that the district provide $500,000 for training around digital training, and also to provide $300,000 for devices. We recognize because of the pandemic that there are so many district residents, thousands of district residents that do not have access to digital devices and aren't skilled or could benefit from additional training to make them more employable in the district or to pursue opportunities, employment opportunities in the district. And so again, we're asking $800,000 for access to digital training and devices under the Department of Human Services. And then when we think about digital literacy, many of us may have visited our libraries. The library is a resource that is available and open to all. And we think that this is an ideal place for digital literacy and training to happen and take place. In the past, the library has been funded to do this, provide this service to district residents. They have not had funding in a couple of years. And so we are asking that the district award or allocate $2 million to provide adult digital literacy in our public libraries throughout the city. And then lastly is $1.3 million for a digital inclusion initiative. And this falls under OCTO, the Office of Technology Officer. And we believe that the district needs to invest in developing a plan for how it is going to level the playing field around the issue around digital literacy and inclusion. And this focuses on both broadband access, training, and education. And the district, by allocating $1.3 million, we're asking the district to study and to really look at this issue and challenge and the gaps around equity, and to come up with a strategy and a plan to level the playing field. And I believe that completes my budget ask for economic development, both small business and workforce. And now I'd like to hand it over to Steve, I don't know if you're interested.
Yvette, before we go to Scott, I just want to
Sure.
make some transitional comments. I just really want to commend the members and the community representatives that have worked with us over particularly this last year, but this is more than just a year's worth of work. If you really listen to the budget ask that Yvette has just presented, it shows much more comprehensive embrace of all of the issues that make community economic development the industry or the field that it is. I remember a few short years ago, our economic development request would have been around 4 or 5. And if you look at our request today, it shows an expansion that is really consistent with the founding mission of CNHED, which is to connect economic development and housing in more seamless ways. And so when you look at the digital inclusion and you look at the focus on the workforce and the commercial corridors and more, you see much more of it. And Yvette, I just want to congratulate you, your team, the members and the community representatives who have worked with you to build out CNHED's economic development agenda. It feels more inclusive, it feels more comprehensive in the issues that we are touching that impact individual as well as business efforts and operations. So I just wanted to commend you and your team and the stakeholders who support you. This is a robust economic development agenda. It's a comprehensive one, and it's a connective one. So thank you so much for all your hard work to get us to this point where we now have a really broad-based economic development agenda. And so with that, we're going to transition over to Scott, who's going to equally present a robust agenda for our budget ask on the housing side.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to walk us through CNHED's budget recommendations for an FY21 supplemental as well as the FY22 budget for budget items related to affordable housing and homelessness prevention. So go ahead, Hallie, and move on to the next slide. Okay, first up is the Housing Production Trust Fund. For both the FY21 supplemental, so that's the budget that we're currently in, and we're recommending additional money be put into the budget we're currently in, as well as the FY22 budget that we're all going to be advocating for. We recommend $250 million or more for this year and for next year. The reason that we are recommending these large amounts is, number one, the district's local budget is doing better than had been predicted with the dire predictions several months ago. And two, we are getting a huge influx of COVID-19 related stimulus funding from the federal government. So our justification for this is that we see kind of three pots or three groupings of affordable housing in the pipeline, or that are going to be in the pipeline, that need this funding. First are the projects that have been in the pipeline since the last consolidated RFP that was in the fall of 2019. There are still projects that met threshold that haven't received funding yet, or projects that were ready to apply but didn't quite make the deadline for that. We also have projects that went through, say, the TOPA process or pre-development between the fall 2019 RFP and the shutdown of the of TOPA tolling and the consolidated RFP schedule. And then third, we have all the properties that are in TOPA tolling or waiting to issue TOPA notices until tolling ends. And for those properties, there are currently a little over 100 projects with over 4,000 units that we're talking about that are waiting for TOPA tolling to end. So not all of those will go through the affordable housing pipeline, but with those three different categories of projects that are in or could go into the affordable housing pipeline, we think that $500 million over the next year and a half is justified. And in conjunction with that, we're also recommending that that DHCD issue its next consolidated RFP during the summer of 2021 to get at those projects that have been waiting for to apply and are already ready to do so, and then to issue two consolidated RFPs in fiscal year 2022, so probably a spring and then a fall, in order to allow for projects that are going to be, that are still waiting for funding or that are going to be coming through after the TOPA tolling ends. And we think that while this has been a crisis for the district, we think this will provide great opportunity. This number of projects that will be starting through the TOPA pipeline at the same time, and in combination with the significant amount of federal funding that will be available. So go ahead and go on, Hallie. So next, the DC Housing Preservation Fund. In talking with many of you who are in some of our working groups, as well as the managers of the DC Housing Preservation Fund, we did some estimates based on those projects waiting TOPA tolling that will need acquisition and critical repair funding that is available through the DC Housing Preservation Fund. And we are estimating that an additional, so in the current FY21 budget, there is a little over $2 million. We think that should be increased in the FY21 supplemental to $15 million, and that another $15 million should be appropriated for the Housing Preservation Fund in FY22 in order to support all those projects that are coming through the TOPA pipeline, and enable more tenant groups to be able to take advantage of these options. So go ahead and go forward, Hallie. Next, the First Right Purchase Program. The FY21 supplemental currently has the $10 million for the first right purchase program. And that's what the budget has had for the past few years. It's a soft segregation within the Housing Production Trust Fund. We are recommending $30 million, a significant increase for FY22, because the Tenant Purchase Working Group, the CNHED, has been working on recommended changes to the First Right Purchase Program to focus it more on small buildings for the creation of limited equity co-ops under 50 units, or for the creation of preservation of affordable housing and rental properties under 30 units. And we think under our proposal that these projects could easily use the $30 million in FY22. And this would be in conjunction with all those TOPA projects moving forward. Also, the DC, the mayor's rental housing preservation strike force has a recommendation in its draft recommendations, which are public, which hopefully will make it into the final recommendation, that the district should have a more robust program for funding affordable housing in small properties under 50 units. And we think that our recommendations for the First Right Purchase Program could really serve that goal of the strike force well. So go ahead and move forward, Alan. Thank you very much. Next, this is a small ask. Last year, CNHED and our allies advocated for the amending of the DC Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which had been created several years ago, and its funding. And that funding won't come online again, or those first allocations won't come online for a few years. But in preparation for that, the DC's Office of the Chief Financial Officer estimates that at DHCD and Office of Tax and Revenue, that it'll take about $200,000 in FY22 for staff preparation work for this program to come online. And so we're recommending $200,000 to support that, because we supported the creation of the program and we want to see it come to fruition in coming years. Go ahead, Hallie. Local Rent Supplement Program. Many of you are very familiar that for the Housing Production Trust Fund, to create 0 to 30% units, the way that almost all of 0 to 30% units through the consolidated RFP with support of the Housing Production Trust Fund, they all require an ongoing operating subsidy from the Local Rent Supplement Program, project or sponsor based. And since we're recommending $250 million or more, our kind of ratio for what it takes to create that many units, or to commit to that many units in a particular year, or to meet that 50% of spending for the HPTF, we calculate that would be $16 million for $250 million of HPTF. And so since we're recommending 250 for both FY21 and 22, we recommend that same amount. And if it's fortuitous and the mayor and council agree to more than 250 million, we will increase our project and sponsor-based LRSP ask to go along with that. Go ahead to the next one, Hallie. Neighborhood-based activities program funding. I'll go ahead and read through this because this is extremely important. Not everybody's familiar with all the important projects and activities that are supported through the Neighborhood-Based Activities Program. This funds community-based organizations, most of which are CNHED members, to supply an array of essential services for district residents, including tenant opportunity to purchase act technical assistance, tenant housing conditions technical assistance, eviction and foreclosure prevention counseling, limited equity cooperative technical assistance, home buyer counseling for HPAP and EHAP, inclusionary zoning certification for tenants wishing to take advantage of it, and Schedule H application assistance. So during the COVID-19 public health emergency and the following recovery, tenants and homeowners will have even greater need for these essential services. And as I mentioned before, that huge wave of TOPA projects that's going to be starting through the pipeline whenever TOPA tolling ends will require significantly more staffing to assist. And our previous research shows that all tenant groups that decide to go for creating or preserving affordable housing at their properties, all of them have assistance from CBOs. And so CBO assistance is absolutely essential. And so we're recommending in the FY21 supplemental to increase that funding by about $2.5 million to $10 million, no, about $3.5 million to $10 million, and to increase that further in FY22 to $12 million for those essential services. And we are recommending to DHCD to give the CBOs hiring authority as soon as possible, because for many of these staffing positions, it takes at least 2 months to hire folks, and then at least another 2 months to train folks to be useful in their jobs. Go ahead and move forward, Hallie. Next, permanent supportive housing. In solidarity with the Way Home campaign, the focus of which is in ending chronic homelessness, CNHED makes these recommendations. $81 million for 2,761 units for singles, and $15.1 million for 432 units of family. These recommendations reflect the funding that it would take to meet the entire need for single and family TAH and PSH in a single year, as compared with most of our recommendations, which are about incremental amounts of funding to meet need over multiple years. So just want to provide that context. And we have gone in solidarity with the Way Home campaign and their recommendations for the past several years. We believe that they have the best data and analysis to inform these asks, and we really appreciate our partnership with them. Go ahead and move forward. Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Even though you all are familiar, I'm hoping, with the new Stay DC program, which is giving hundreds of millions of dollars for rental assistance to district renters from the federal government, we know that most of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program funding has already been used or committed for FY21. And there will be tenants who do not fit the criteria for the Stay DC program. And so we think it's important to add another $5 million in FY21 for those tenants who will not be eligible for Stay DC. And we recommend another $15 million in FY22 for those tenants who will not be eligible for Stay DC, but that meet ERAP qualifications. Go ahead and move forward. And then homeownership. Based on DHCD's data that they submitted during their performance oversight hearings to the council, we believe that it is justified to increase the FY21 supplemental to $21 million and to increase the EHAP supplemental to $4 million. Very hot housing market, lots of people wanting to buy because of low interest rates, and we think it's very important to increase these. And then for FY22, we are recommending $24 million for HPAP and $4 million for EHAP. And based on the past few years' trajectory, the housing market, and the significant demand we see for HPAP certification through the HPAP certification programs at CBOs, we think that the district will have no trouble in spending this money. Go ahead and move forward. Thank you all very much for letting me have the opportunity to go through the budget asks for housing and homelessness prevention. Thank you.
And before we hear from Hallie, I just want to commend Scott and all of the CNHED members and community representatives and stakeholders who have worked tirelessly. Both housing and economic development have been amazingly tricky pursuits this year, from emergency measures to reopening protocols, and to not taking our eye off the ball from our historical pursuits. It's just been an amazing, challenging period. Going back to the beginning of the pandemic and trying to figure out rent maintenance fund, utility fund, and reserve fund impacts because of the pandemic, to participating on the mayor's rental housing strike force and reopening advisory board, as well as trying to, focus on a kind of sweeping list of impacts that we almost had to stay in touch with up to the moment. The housing leaders of CNHED have just done an amazing job of generating data, which has really made us influential in a whole number of conversations that have led to really good decisions by our city council and by our mayor, but most importantly have protected vulnerable populations through this time. So to emerge from all of those winding roads to this place of an aspirational budget, not just going after numbers that we want, but numbers that are supported by data, and being able to track what the influx of federal funds means in terms of realistic, achievable opportunities. Again, I just want to kind of tip my hand to Scott and the Housing Network for the work they've done throughout the pandemic and in this budget season as we have moved forward. So now we're going to hear from Hallie, who I will say at the onset has probably had the hardest bouncing ball in many ways to follow throughout this, actually the last two budget seasons. And to put it in some context, we hired Hallie exactly a month before the pandemic started. And so Hallie hasn't had 1 ounce of normalcy around advocacy because we haven't had the ability to convene the resident leaders or the campaign coordinators or do so much. We've had no ability to meet in person with council members or members of the mayor's administration. And she's done a really great job of keeping us connected, of helping us to figure out ways to lift up the voices of those with lived experience, and to help people who may struggle with connectivity or digital divide issues be able to show up in the right time, in the right place. So I want to thank Hallie in advance, and she's going to now share with you the magic formula for moving forward to make sure that those voices, our traditional and historical voices, are platformed in a way to be heard during this budget and advocacy season. Hallie?
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to briefly go over our tentative plan for what advocacy will look like for the FY22 budget. The mayor had, as we know, pushed back her budget release to May 27th. And so, and the council just released their updated schedule over last weekend. And so we are still trying to pull together some of these events, but we're going to tell you about them anyway, with the hopes that they'll also happen and that you'll be able to attend. So first and foremost, we have our budget briefings. And if you were with us last year, you know that we broke out our budget briefings into two different ones, one focusing on affordable housing and community development, and the other focusing on small business, workforce, and economic development. And so we plan to do the same this year to break out two of those budget briefings. And you can see on the screen who the agencies are that we will be inviting. We've been in conversations with these agencies probably since February, scheduling, rescheduling, as the council and the mayor have changed their budget release schedules and whatnot. And so still in coordination with them to nail down a date for these briefings, and they will be virtual coming up for probably early May, or I guess late May, early June, after the mayor releases her budget. In addition to those two budget briefings, we're also planning or hoping to plan a committee council briefing, which will feature the chairs of the 4 council committees for which we typically engage with the most. The Committee on Housing and Executive Administration, Committee on Business and Economic Development, Committee on Labor and Workforce Development, and the Committee on Human Services. Again, we're still in conversations with these offices, so we haven't set a date, but this committee council briefing would be in lieu of Advocacy Day, since it's not quite safe to all gather quite yet, but hopefully we'll get back to all of our fun rallies and advocacy days next year. And I'm looking forward to planning those for the first time and actually going through with it. So that's our plan, or tentative plan for budget briefings. And just to go over quickly, many of you might have received an email on Monday about the new council's oversight hearing schedules. And so it's also on our website, but just a brief overview of the 6 oversight hearings that I think capture most of the agencies and programs that we have recommendations for. Again, we'll be sharing this PowerPoint after the webinar, so don't feel like you need to scribble all of this down. It's also on our website. But budget markups will start on June 29th and go through July 1st. And finally, you're probably trying to figure out what is it that I can do since we're all still existing in a remote way. CNHED has secured a digital advocacy platform called Phone to Action. And some of you may have already been to that webpage for the Digital Equity Now pledge. And it's very simple to use. Basically, you just put in your contact information and take any action that we or I have set up for folks to take. And so we plan to use this platform for folks to be able to email and send messages directly to their council members, for folks to sign on petitions. You can tweet directly at your council members. And so once we get our talking points for our recommendations and all of these things set up, then we will make sure that everyone has the links and can go ahead and engage with Phone to Action. And I know this presentation has links, and again, once you get the presentation, you'll be able to click through and explore, but it's also all on our website as well. Two of the specific things that I want to uplift, and Yvette briefly mentioned one of these, which is our Digital Equity Now campaign, focusing on digital inclusion and equity in the district. Right now, we have an active pledge through our Phone to Action platform where folks just put in their contact information and sign our pledge. And soon we will have a petition. We will have ways for people to engage with their council members by sharing our recommendations. And that's all to come. And then additionally, I wanted to mention that it's going to be Small Business Month in a few days. May, we're using to uplift and celebrate and recognize and support small businesses in the district. They've gone through a very difficult year with COVID, as everyone has. And so this is a month-long engagement. There's several events, several initiatives, so many so that I couldn't possibly fit them all into this webinar. But we do have a landing page up, cnhed.org/Small Business Month. You can go there. You can also click on this link when you get the presentation. And so there's several ways to get involved. I know there'll be emails going out about it. And so it should be really fun. And just remember to support your local small businesses throughout the month of May. And I think that's it. Yeah, we're moving on to questions.
Thank you, Hallie. And I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of close out this segment without thanking Phil, our board chair, and the entire CNHED board during this really fast-moving, now season and a half, or feel like we're moving toward 2 seasons. Phil and the board have been just amazingly supportive, you know, reacting to the nimble challenges that the organization has had to face. You know, our participation in a number of mayoral groups, the Reopening DC Advisory Board, the Rental Housing Strike Force. The board has just been an amazing platform for us to participate and to participate responsibly in what were some really high-flying decisions that had to be made. So I want to thank Phil, our board chair, and the CNHED board for support during this time. So let's see if we have questions. I'm going to cite the question and then more than likely direct it to one of the team if it's something I think I can handle. Is there anything being done to improve the digital divide that exists in the district? Yvette, I think you probably know the most about that. So can you respond to that? That's from Sylvester Bush.
Can you state the question again, Steve?
Is there anything being done to improve the digital divide that exists in the district?
So I know because of the pandemic, there's been a lot of attention focused on making sure that school-age children had devices. There was a recognition that many of the families didn't have a device or didn't have internet. And so I know that the district has a partnership with Comcast to provide free access to low-income residents. I know that there has been a slow enrollment in terms of residents participating in that program. I think there's some issues or maybe around the launch of that program, but we're going to kind of look into that further. In addition, I think the district has also made available laptops to some of the workforce residents who are in workforce development programs. So for example, Bite Back has distributed laptops. This effort does not really address the breadth and the depth of the need. And so that's why we launched this Digital Equity Now campaign to raise the issue, to get all residents involved, because we think that it impacts all residents. We also recognize that there's part of the district that doesn't have sufficient broadband access, which is also, coupled with this broader issue around digital inclusion and equity. So again, we encourage you to sign the pledge. We encourage you to share it with others, with your colleagues, and your family members.
Thanks, Yvette. Rob Cook asked, can you discuss more details on the markups? Hallie, I'm not sure if you have, I know Yvette's focused on hers, Scott's focused on his, but do you have any general update around the markup? Rob, I might ask you to, Rob, I'm assuming that you mean more details regarding the dates of the markups. And if that's the case, I know, Hallie, that we have promoted in the FYI of what we know or what we've known. But if you could comment around what we will do to inform people about the markups going forward.
Sure. So budget markups currently are scheduled for June 29th to July 1st. And Rob, in case you're asking what budget markups are, they are when the council sits down after going through all of the oversight hearings and marks up the mayor's budget. And Scott or Yvette or Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think Robert's question, and Robert, you can type a qualifying, maybe which markups are happening on which date, which is why I said, Hallie, once we get this, if we know the schedule now, so like housing may be on one day and economic development another, and so I think it may be more specific details around which markups are happening on which date.
I can look up that information and see if it's out. And uplift it in the follow-up email or in the chat, but I don't know that right now, nor do I know if it's been released. I know that we have the timestamp.
Scott, I think this is a question for you. This is from Martha Davis. Do we think the council discussion of the comp plan will increase their interest in funding housing and community development?
I would hope so. Granted, the comp plan just deals, for that Martha knows this well, but for those who are not as familiar with the comp plan deals with regulating zoning changes. So what is possible as compared to funding, and increases in density allowable in the future land use maps and other aspects of the comp plan allow the district to exchange density increases for properties in exchange for community benefits, which we generally advocate for those. The first priority should be the creation of affordable housing. And so the comp plan is in exchanging something else of value that the district has as compared to funding. But the comp plan and the advocacy around it have increased knowledge and interest in the ways that affordable housing is funded and increased across the district. So fingers crossed.
So Nahama has provided markup details in the chat. The housing markup is June 30th from 1 to 2:30. Labor and Workforce is June 30th from 3 to 4:30. Committee of the Whole, July 1st from 4 to 5:30. Business and Economic Development, July 1st from 10 to 11:30. Nahama, your check is in the mail. We appreciate you giving us that up to the minute information. I do have another question from Sylvester Bush again, regarding the lack of housing that exists and that commercial real estate is suffering during the pandemic. People working from home, have you considered making recommendations on using some of the vacant commercial office space for housing need? I'll start this, and Scott, you can probably give. So a couple of years ago, feels like a couple of years ago, we actually facilitated the conduction of a study for the district on converting office buildings to affordable housing. I think if I recall correctly, the focus of that study was on DC-owned properties, but I think many of the principals, no, it wasn't. Scott, thanks for shaking your head. But and I think that there were some learnings that we had back then, that it was tricky, that it was complicated, some more things. Scott can give specifics. It'd be interesting to see if the pandemic has changed or altered some of the conditions that we discovered when we did that examination pre-pandemic, but I'll let Scott respond further around recommendations. I know that there are a lot of conversations and a lot of examinations, but Scott may know more specifics and up to the minute information. Scott?
Sure. So our analysis was based on the market at the time, so not during the pandemic. And what it showed was that, and we were directed to look at the conversion of underutilized office space for affordable housing, not just housing in general. And so what we found is that if you compare spending $1 on the creation or preservation of affordable housing through, say, the Housing Production Trust Fund versus providing incentives for office space to affordable housing, in general, it was more cost effective to continue with the current models for preserving affordable housing. We did find that it might be worthwhile to consider Class C office space in outside the center business districts. That might prove cost effective to convert that to affordable housing. But that said, the economics of commercial office space may change in the post-pandemic era as we all see what businesses decide to do about whether they're going to go back to the way it used to be, or whether they're going to work more virtually or some kind of hybrid model. And so that'll have to be evaluated. The key thing for affordable housing, I think, is the dollar better spent on traditional methods we have now or in incentivizing these types of conversions? And if folks are interested more, there's all kinds of complexities with building codes for housing versus building codes for office development, and what you have to do to convert one to the other that makes it more complicated than just changing use.
Thank you. So I want to remind people again to go into the chat and sign the digital inclusion pledge. I know both Yvette and Hallie have mentioned the importance of it, but I just want to lift it up again. We think that there is a future campaign in this, and the more people's voices we can get behind it early in the process gives it its best possibility of becoming a campaign. And so if you haven't gone in and seen the link, and Hallie, can I ask that we send the link to all of the attendees post this meeting? I mean, we put it up on the website and we've probably sent notifications, but we really want to push that home. It's been just reposted in there again. Other questions? I have none in the chat right now. We are almost at time, but I'll give a moment or two in case anybody else has any questions. And then if not, Hallie, I may ask you to close us out with a plea to follow you in the weeks to come as we try to make lemonade out of these lemons that are known as our current continued remote existence. So seeing no questions, Hallie, close us out, remind us of what's to come. See this church on the screen, this is what we miss. I'm reminded that 2 years ago, Hallie and I actually toured Shiloh Baptist Church, and we actually visioned our rally with signs hanging from the rafters and so much more. And seeing this is a little painful. But Hallie, close us out.
Yes, so stay with us the next couple of weeks. If you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, I send out an advocacy digest every other week, which will probably pick up in the coming weeks as we have, a lot more action with the council coming up. And I'll include all of this in a follow-up email, but stay tuned. There's a lot that folks can still do from home, engage. Phone to action will help us do that. And even if for folks who don't have access digitally, there's options for calling in, phone calls, submitting testimony, and I'm here to help folks all through that advocacy and their engagement with the council. And so folks should always feel free to reach out to me if they need assistance with engaging with the council, because that's what I'm here to do, is help and help folks get engaged, residents get engaged and make their voices heard on the level of the council.
Okay, thanks to Raina and Hallie for keeping us connected remotely. Raina, thanks for continuing to ensure that we are meeting monthly and making sure that our information services are still regular, if not robust. And we look forward to that. I just did get another question in. Let me see if can you provide the pros and cons of using commercial real estate for housing in a document. This is Sylvester Bush. Scott, do you want to forward him the office building to affordable housing study? I don't, I know it's not entirely contemporary given the current conditions, but that might be a good place to support Sylvester.
Do we have Sylvester's email?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yvette and DCAP deal with Sylvester a lot. So thanks everybody. Thanks Team CNHED. Thanks CNHED members. Thanks CNHED board. I think that we are on the verge of a big 2 years in terms of investments. I think this is the aspirational moment that we have been waiting for. And I also think that it will catapult us to a new platform that I'm hoping we don't have to retreat from, and that we can get closer to some of the goals we've been working so hard over the years to pursue. So thanks everyone.